So, Jack,
So we're recording, so to start the discussion, Matt is going to give a summary of the first article.
So the first article on how AI is spreading throughout the supply chain. AI in production and distribution will have the greatest impact of all AI we've seen so far. So AI obviously in ChatGPT, things online, but this article talks about how this AI in supply chain source is going to have the greatest impact so far. One example are obviously robots in like manufacturing service lines, right? But some other impacts that this AI is going to have in the supply chain is that it's going to be able to inspect and spot flaws on assembly lines more accurately than humans will, so accuracy will improve. They'll be able to predict when equipment can fail. So for large firms that operate with large assets like airlines, oil firms, energy companies, to fail is a big harm to the company. So having AI that can be more accurate with that is obviously a huge plus. It can predict sales for the next 18 months, which prevents overstocking and understocking, so you almost know how much you're going to have to bring in. AI can forecast the order items will arrive and leave a warehouse, so things can be put in the correct position more effectively than a human would do. In the same sense, it'll track movement, so how things are getting delivered into different warehouses. And then it can cut logistics costs, so normally paying someone to figure out all logistics, AI can do that all on its own more accurately and at less cost, so it's a big benefit.
So that was a brief summary about that. Anyone have any questions on that article? No, so now we'll go over to Chris to summarize the next article.
What I wrote down from this article, I said during the pandemic, the entire world stopped. This made the restart of supply chains back up hard for companies financially and people-wise. The companies were faced with sudden shortages of customers as households were locked down. This led to a loss of some perishable products as they were made in preparation for sales that never happened with the pandemic. That's what I got.
All right, any questions on that, or we're good? So we kind of went over how like these things affected the supply chain. So can anyone give me like an exact description of what is this supply chain?
well, the supply chain is it's a digital. It's almost like digital. It's not truly there, but it's there. It's all the goods and products that are being sold or in supply of. In the first article, it talks about how Amazon predicted, with their algorithm, predicted a surge in demand for a product, and they're able to supply that product a lot more than the other products, and it made them billions of dollars because of it. One of the things that I learned about supply chain just through reading these articles was that it's not just about like how they're made or how maybe what materials are used to make them, but it's about like kind of how Matt said in his description of the article, distribution and making sure they're all getting to the right places. So that's a way that companies are using AI to benefit. They're using AI to make sure that their inventory is getting to the right places, and this is helpful for these companies to cut these costs, but it's also like hurtful because these are a variety of jobs that used to be done by people.
So I think Chris did a very good job explaining, but they also did talk a little about what is going to happen in the future to the supply chain and what changes are being made to it right now. So can somebody just go over like the things that the second article said about how the supply chain is changing?
So this is like the first discussion question for that one. But what is AI doing specifically to improve the supply chain? So I said AI can make back office work like finances and things like that easier. Similar to the way like Excel changed like the finance and accounting world a while ago when that first came out. 'Cause before you were like writing it all down, but now it's all just in like a spreadsheet and you can do formulas and stuff. And I said it'll impact manufacturing by improving like the manufacturing through like computer vision systems.
It also, like, AI could also help supply chain with, like, calculating what's going to be in higher demand, especially as seasons change. People's demands change a lot more with it. So as it changes, AI could help predict what to stock up on or what to get rid of, so their profit could be way more marginal compared to what it could be if they did it through a human.
All right, and so then can somebody explain the article, the second article, moving away from AI? It's talked about the regionalization and the supplier diversification. And anyone want to explain that?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So they talked a lot about the idea of having different suppliers across different areas, which benefit-wise, it allows people to get things more efficiently. Things like, I know it mentioned Johnson & Johnson, things like medicine are going to be things where regionalizing the suppliers would be beneficial because people have easy access. There's not going to be, things aren't going to be on back order, things are going to get to people a lot easier, but on the downside, it's obviously a lot more costly for these companies to have all these suppliers in different areas rather than just one area where it can be the most efficient. So you kind of have to figure out that medium between, do I want to provide strong customer service and everything to be easy facilitated, or do I want to save as much money as possible?
Like kind of hop on with Matt said, like you have to kind of find that balance, but if one of your main sources is heavily impacted, and you don't have like another fallback option, then like you're pretty much out of that product or whatever that company is selling you, so that you won't be able to produce your product without that. Like kind of like the microchips, like you had all the cars, but you didn't have the chips, and then you couldn't sell the cars because you didn't have the chips, and all these cars are backed up. So like it's important to make sure you have like backup plans in case one of your major suppliers fails.
If you see also, especially Amazon, the supply chain is almost growing with that, because if you walk around the turnpikes especially, you see a lot of these distribution centers popping up, big warehouses that store a lot of their stuff. That shows they're expanding almost their market to get stuff to people.
Anything else to add, or any questions before we go over?
I'll add a little bit on this. So companies they're spreading their suppliers around the world, and kind of what Matt was saying, it limits your customer service base of your company, and more so just cutting costs. There's a bunch of major companies have a bunch of different warehouses around the world, and this leads to easier shipping, because instead of something ordering from New York, it would be coming from Philadelphia per se.
Before you go on, and this is a bit of a stretch question, can somebody or you guys give us a working definition of just-in-time manufacturing, just-in-time logistics? Because that was the buzzword in the 90s all the way up through until the pandemic hit. And in your reading, it talks about it references it just once. It's kind of a shift from just-in-time to redundant supplies. So even if you don't, know, at least from the description, you might be able to say.
It would be like if I was building, if I was building a car and I needed like the bumper, and the bumper was like the last thing I ever it was at the last phase of the external part of the car, and the bumper's the last thing that goes on. The shipment will arrive at the exact time that I need that bumper. So that would be like just-in-time logistics, and then it could move on to the next phase, or it could move off the line and be ready for sale.
Good working definition, good example. Jim?
I was gonna say it's when you realize you're gonna have a shortage of materials to make your product, and you realize that you're in the middle of manufacturing it, and you order the supplies and it gets to you in quotations just in time.
Okay. Now, who do you think, who invented the just-in-time methodology? Who perfected it? If you had to say what country started this, what would you, any intuition? What country perfected just-in-time manufacturing?
The U.S. U.S.
U.S. did not. We took a page from their book.
I would say like Norway, like somewhere in Europe or
Okay,
something.
no? The Japanese. The Japanese start, and what they did, and they really started in the auto manufacturing plant, and what they would do is they said, yeah, we need bumpers, and we need tires, and we need all this. So they didn't want to keep inventory. What happens to your money when you have it in inventory?
Technology is decades old and these events are trying to add in
To a certain
funding,
extent.
you know.
But you have tied up capital by having inventory, right? You pay money to have tires on the shelf and bumpers and all that stuff. And what that means is you don't have as much capital to buy other things. What the insight for the Japanese was, is if I have a car manufacturing plant, I will invite my bumper manufacturing person to build a plant right next door. And when I have like 2 bumpers left, I will call them up and say, send 20 more bumpers over. They have to take care of the inventory. And when I get those 20 bumpers, maybe I have them for a half a day. And then they're on the car and they're out. So they really talked about integrating that supply chain.
So one of my friends, his name's Will, works for the Viking Yacht Company, which is like the premier like sport fish yacht company, and they like perfected like the line pretty much. So like they build the most boats like out of any company in the world, and the best boats, some would say. So he works for Atlantic Marine Electronics, which they did exactly that. They build the entire boat out, and then Atlantic Marine Electronics, although it's not a product, it's more of a service. They come in with their technicians when exactly when they need them, and right when like the perfect timing is, and they do all the wiring, and they step off the boat and they do the rest, and then when they need them again, they come back. So it's kind of just like
That's that whole philosophy, that just-in-time integration, absolutely. You're doing a good job so far, and didn't want to hijack you, but I wanted to.
Yeah, no, I actually want to add on to that because, like, with the personal interest, that's basically like what my dad does for a lot of hospitals. He basically like takes the supply, sees like what they have, what they need, and if they need anything, like they go to him, like he's the middleman, and he'll send it over. So that's basically like where I got the inspiration.
Gotcha. Did he tell you what metrics they use, how they determine when to order, at what stock point they're gonna, or at the end? Okay. It's a whole, supply chain management is a whole area of, it's a whole concentration area. So if you like logistics, if you like that stuff, I mean, you can make, it's a big business. So keep on, we're gonna go until 1:15. Okay, so continue with this. Colin, you need to step up a little bit, okay? Chris, maybe you as well. Just want to give you feedback because I want you guys to succeed. So
I'll start with the discussion questions now. We'll go over this and in part. So first, what were the effects of COVID on the supply chain? I think Chris answered that. Do you want to reiterate?
Well, COVID affected in a very interesting way almost. It affected in a bad way at first with people not being able to go to work to see how it's run and all that. But then it also left room for the AI to be integrated into the space. Because right as COVID was happening, AI started making a big turn to go worldwide almost in a way and got very powerful. So they thought, while everyone's at home because they're too worried for COVID, that they could integrate the system that might be able to do it better than what the humans were already doing.
So I feel like the supply chain got affected greatly by COVID just because in a negative way, just because of how I can relate to I was buying a car during COVID, and what Tom said, they had the cars but not the chips. So then
they were in a shortage of certain cars, and like the prices went up, so I had to wait a year or more to get my car and pay more, obviously, which affected me greatly too. So it's not people weren't willing to spend that much money on
See if Colin's got something to add to this. I wanna get him in the conversation.
Well, COVID-19, it hit companies with like shortages, and it was followed by like factory shutdowns that interrupted the flow of goods. Is that right? Yeah, that's what I have. Say that again.
I said the effects on the supply chain due to COVID will cause some border closures, factory closures, and the lack of the in-person workforce. So some ways you could avoid this or prevent it in the future would be like try to reduce the factory closures, and then now you can rely on AI to keep the factories running with like maybe half the workforce or not as many people, and then somehow figure out a way to reduce the transportation issues, which like Matt said earlier, like some of those big airline companies, like with the new AI, you can sense a problem in an airplane, so like you might be able to get ahead of the problem before like it really screws you.
All right, and this is a little confusing, but how is this represented in the New York Fed's monthly global supply chain pressure index?
So we've noted that the stress level of the supply chain shot up to double that of the 2008 financial crisis, and I think that just relates to the kind of the back order that things were on, right? Households were locked down, so factories shut down, and then the flow of goods were shut down as well with transportation. So that whole kind of sequential effect is kind of what shut down the supply chain market.
Hang on to that, but explain what the y-axis means, because I was confused.
Yeah, so the y-axis is the index score. So it's kind of like if you take stat, it's like the z-score. So 0 means it's the average. So it's the mean of the supply chain, basically. So you'll see in January of 2020, it shoots up, which means like the
But is it a standard deviation or is it a percentage?
Yeah, it's standard deviation.
Do you guys know what a standard deviation is? Is there anybody not taking stats? Okay, so explain what a standard deviation is.
So it's like how far it is from the average. So you'll see the standard deviation goes up a lot during COVID. So once January 2020 hits, going into September 2020, you'll see the index score shoot up, which is due to COVID.
Okay, so one standard deviation encompasses what percentage of the data points?
34%.
No, well, on the plus side, so about 68% plus and minus. So two standard deviations encompass
95.
Yeah, about 95%. So if it gets above one standard deviation, it means that, 2/3 of the time it's within one standard deviation. It goes above, and you saw that during COVID. So, there's a lot of graphs that are very data intense, and to be able to read that and understand that and not misinterpret it is important. But I'm glad that you included, number one, I'm glad that you included the graph, and number two, I'm very pleased that you can interpret that graph well.
So now, any questions on that? So what do you think we can do to help the supply chain if this happens again? Any ideas?
Like I said, like rely on the new AI to like keep some of these automated factories like running and like hopefully there's not another pandemic, but like another issue coming out of AI is the workforce is depleting. Like AI is taking people's jobs. So like if a pandemic were to happen, the AI already is kind of replacing their jobs, which is good and bad. I guess it just depends on the situation they're in.
I said maybe we could add regulations to how much of AI could be used, just of a workforce standpoint. Kind of thought Tom was saying, we have to find a happy medium of how much AI we are using to develop in the supply chain world, but also making sure there are jobs available and that people can work.